Wow. I want to thank Catalyst Project, first and foremost, to allow me to come back home. I was 3 years at Dublin Correctional Center, and in this audience, we have another ex-political prisoner. In addition to that, may I mention Donna Wilmot? Yes, Donna Wilmot. I mean, an ex-political prisoner who was very inspirational for the Puerto Rican political prisoners. So I can't, stop there, because in the audience, there are so many, so many who were part of our extended family. So I have to welcome them, and I want to ask, the blessings of some of our women who have passed on to a different, state, and that is our Marilyn Buck. Así que, Marilyn, échame las bendiciones que yo necesito. It is moving, it is powerful, and I have to admit that when I was invited to come here, I experienced something that was moving. And I couldn't come into this circle, could not come in basically with something written. I had to somehow or other come through the door, remove all clothing, feel vulnerable, and speak from the heart. And Lara, you did it. It was very moving, very powerful. And I hope that I can do justice, because it needs to happen, to speak about the struggle of the Puerto Rican people. Our sense is that in this moment, people are focusing just on Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria came through as a vicious Category 5 through Puerto Rico. In fact, the eye of Puerto Rico came through Calle. So I was able to hear those strong winds. They were winds of anger. They were winds trying to, somehow or other, waken up, shake up the people. The water for me was almost like a cleansing. It is very hard because it created a lot of human suffering, to the point where we are experiencing a humanitarian crisis. But it only somehow or other began to unmask what was already there. What was there and is there is colonialism. And what is colonialism? When did it come? Well, it came, back in 1898. How? With a U.S. invasion. What resulted after that invasion? It's been over 117 or 119 years of occupation. At this moment, in addition to the hurricane, there's also the talk, and how many people have heard about the fiscal control board that Obama in 2016, placed on the island of Puerto Rico. Well, what I want to at least leave clear here about una junta. We've heard of junta in Latin America, right? And what does a junta mean? It is a takeover, all right? It is a takeover. And they call it promesa. They call it a promise. It is not a promise, okay? It is a further stranglehold over our lives. And for us, that isn't anything new, okay? After that military occupation, what did they do? they imposed the US dollar system. But before they imposed it, they devalued the money that was originally in our pockets. In addition to that, they imposed a US federal postal system. They made it also, a couple of years later, you know what I mean, mandatory that we become citizens of the United States. But what were the benefits of becoming US citizens at that time? It forced the United States to take our men to fight for their wars. When there was opposition to, let's say, for example, the takeover of our land and impose a sugar production economy, that sugar profit, did it help the people of Puerto Rico? No, it did not. When they moved further, you know what I mean, after a couple of decades of the sugar production, what came next? They began to create these tax exemptions. And what did that do? It allowed corporations to come in. And when corporations come in, they dictate what the economy is going to, what kind of economy is going to exist. So we've been at the whim, you know what I mean, of corporate interests. Never once, you know what I mean, benefiting the people of Puerto Rico. It just impoverishes us, okay? They set up the mechanism, you know what I mean, for their massive profits. You know, the triple tax exemptions. Did they allow us to tax those corporations to leave some of the money in the homeland? No, they didn't. They made the workers poor. And when the people stood up, they stood up striking. They stood up pointing the finger, you know what I mean, that there was never any protection for our land, for our water, and for our workers, for the people. It created back in that period migration. When I came out of prison, I was able to go to Hawaii, and I met with the Hawaiians, okay, who still consider themselves Puerto Ricanos. And back in 2000, they celebrated their centennial. And when I asked the story, I says, well, how did you get here? I was amazed to hear that in some instances, their fathers or grandfathers were looking for jobs. And they were told, okay, get on, you know, this method of transportation and get to the western part of the island. Little did they know that they would be moved into vessels and carried through the, shipped to, I'm thinking the southern part of of the United States, which is probably around Texas. And from there, they were put on a train system. Well, some of those people that arrived on the soil of the United States said, hell no. You know what I mean? They literally understood what was happening. They were being kidnapped. And the response there was to, as soon as they landed, to get out, you know what I mean, and free themselves, because the rest of the people were placed on a train to the San Francisco area and then there boarded, you know what I mean, on a boat to Hawaii. And it doesn't stop there. They carry on the traditions. Maybe their music isn't the same as the rhythms that you hear on the Puerto Rican island, but it still has the beauty of the rhythm and the notes that they were taught. They showed me also a cookbook, and they adapted, you know what I mean, to making their pasteles and their arroz con gandules with what was there. And it shows, you know, the power of solidarity and feel, you know what I mean, that we are part you know what I mean, of others also. Because the story there is that at 12 noon, when the bell would ring for the people to come through, you know, back from the plantations and go around and have their meals, they might not have been able to speak the language, but they made the gesture of sharing their food. So that's extremely powerful, and that speaks for how, I mean, the United States dealt with us. You know, for them we are invisible. You know what I mean? And we are not to resist. So this thing about the junta, this thing about the fiscal board, this thing about, you know what I mean, the fact that the fiscal board needs to come in because the Puerto Rican people are not intelligent enough to deal with the massive debt. Okay? So people from the outside have to come in and manage this. Well, that's a bunch of BS. That's a bunch of BS. The debt is not our debt. It is Wall Street. It is definitely Wall Street. When you think about Wall Street, and you think about the junta, everything that they're doing is in secrecy. Follow the money. They say $73 billion. Most of it is in interest rates. But not the interest rates of present. It is you take out a loan and you pay me 45 years down the road, and that interest begins to compound. But how conveniently for them to throw on the shoulders of the Puerto Rican people, you have a $73 billion debt. And for the groups that are here, it's important that we receive the support of demanding, not an audit, demanding the withdrawal of that debt. Complete withdrawal. But like what Lara said, it's so difficult, you know, to squeeze in a little bit of history. But as I said before, this is not new to us. It's not new, and there has always been resistance. And I can speak from personal experience, you know what I mean? When we, a group of us, you know, in the United States, more specifically in the Chicago area, began to understand colonialism, and began to understand that international solidarity forced, you know what I mean, the writings of international law that clearly states that colonialism is an international crime. Punto. Punto. But we have to be very careful with that colonial mindset, because we don't question. We don't question. And when we questioned, what were we confronted with? Comparable to a life sentence. We didn't go into the courts, both the state and federal courts, like lambs, passive or whatnot. We were very much aware, because we carry in each of ourselves, because we believe in the ancestors. And we carry that responsibility of not allowing ourselves to be invisible or our voices taken from us. When we spoke out, it was not because we were individuals in front of a federal or state judge. It was the embodiment of Puerto Rico. It was the embodiment of decades of colonial repression. And we knew that slowly but surely our land was being taken from us. Our language was attacked when, you know, in the period of the 30s or 40s, they tried to impose English only in Puerto Rico. English only, but there was resistance. It didn't happen. So there's so much here, you know what I mean, and so much that, and I know that I'm not going to be able to cover it, but it is extremely important for there to be action, and the action has to start with first and foremost, the Puerto Ricans. It has to be us creating a vision, and that vision is take back our land. It is definitely it is the younger generation that is challenging our generation, and I'm open to it. I am definitely open to it. And the most powerful way of that resistance is that these youngsters are not going to pickets, but the university students, they did have an encampment in front of the federal courts, and they were denouncing the thing of the junta, and they were denouncing the fact that they, you know, the whole concept of debt, you know what I mean, is to shrink any kind of public services, and the universities are being affected. I mean, they want to cut half of the university budget. In addition to all that, the daughter of an immigrant, Papito, you know what I mean, who his hands had, for me, you know what I mean, the blood, sweat, and tears of people who worked the land. My dad loved to grow. The youngsters are doing that. The youngsters are not seeing that as something backward, you know what I mean, as something that is ignorant, you know what I mean, and wait a minute, I'd rather go to a university and you know, collect a degree. They know where the wealth of the land is. They know where the wealth of human value is, and that is the connection to the land. And I think the struggle of the Native Americans show us that, what happens when we lose it. So I'm not sure how much time I have here, because we're going to continue this, you know, but that is for me, you know what I mean, a summary of, you know, what colonialism, you know, the naked, barbaric, you know what I mean, repressive form of colonialism is. But we resist. I'm a daughter of immigrants, born and raised in the United States, and it is powerful to say that I knew and connected with my history, and I was willing to sacrifice my life. Definitely. So we're seeing another wave of massive migration coming off that island, you know what I mean? But I have hopes that they will also struggle here, like the struggle will continue in the United States.